Welcome back. We hope you enjoy our story so far. Don't be shy by sharing your opinion. We would love to improve and get better. Tonight, we aren't visiting a castle tower or a knight's armor-filled hall. No, tonight we're slipping in through the back door, quietly, softly, so no one hears us. We're heading to the stone-floored corridors behind the dining room, where the walls are damp, the air smells like ashes and tallow, and the footsteps never echo. This is the story of the ones history rarely writes about, the ones who rose before the sun, bent their backs, hushed their voices, and made the grand houses run. This is the story of the servants. And tonight you are one of them. Let the day begin. You wake up before the cocks crow, but you didn't sleep much anyway. You slept on the floor, curled in your cloak, or maybe on a sack of straw in the corner of the kitchen, still warm from the hearth, but filled with the scent of onion skins, spilled ale, and soot. You stretch quietly. There's no bell, no gentle voice waking you. Just instinct and routine. Your joints are stiff. Your hands already ache. But there's no time for complaints, because the fire isn't lit yet, and that's your job. You rise, pull your coarse linen tunic tighter, and fumble for flint in the darkness. Your fingers are cold. Your breath fogs. The floor beneath your bare feet is damp. One spark, then two, then the crackle of flame, a small victory before anyone else stirs. From there, the rhythm of your day begins not with intention, but with repetition. You draw water from the well. It's heavy, the bucket straining your arms. Your hands slip on the handle, splashing water onto your legs. You sweep the great hall, though it never seems clean. Dirt clings to the stone like memory. You polish cutlery, even though you'll never use it. You empty chamber pots, quietly, discreetly, carrying the weight of someone else's body like it's nothing. You learn not to breathe too deeply. By sunrise, you've already completed a dozen tasks and no one has said your name. That's part of the job, not to be noticed, to move when needed, to listen without speaking, to anticipate before being told. You are expected to be invisible but also perfect. One misstep, one broken dish, one slow response to the master's bell. Punishment. It might be a scolding, sharp in public, or extra duties, or worse, dismissal. And dismissal doesn't just mean a lost job. It means no shelter, no bread, no one to vouch for you. So you work with care, your eyes on the floor, your voice tucked behind your teeth. Meals come, if they come at all, in the margins. You might steal a crust from the kitchen table, lick gravy from a spoon before it's washed. You chew quickly, standing. Always standing, you keep moving. There's laundry to wash in the icy stream. There are candles to trim, floors to scrub, linens to beat. There are people to serve who will never once ask how your day has been. But in this quiet, grueling world, you find your own rhythm. You know how many steps it takes from the pantry to the scullery. You know which floorboards squeak. You know which other servant hides scraps in the sleeve of her dress, and you let her, because you've done it too. You work long after the sun goes down. You tidy what others have dirtied. You prepare for the next day before this one has even ended. And when at last the house quiets and the candles are snuffed, you curl into your corner again, cold, tired, aching, but alive. Still here, and somehow that feels like something close to victory. Now, let us step away from the shadows of the halls and into the flickering candlelight of a woman who broke the silence. One servant who dared to write her name into history. History rarely remembers servants, but sometimes someone speaks so clearly, so truthfully, that their words echo far beyond the walls they once scrubbed. Tonight, we listen to one of them. Her name was Marjorie Kemp. Now, she wasn't technically a maid or scullion, but she lived in a time when women, especially those without title or wealth, were expected to remain quiet, obedient, and small. And Marjorie refused. Born in the late 1300s in Norfolk, England, She was the daughter of a prosperous merchant, but her life wasn't one of comfort or certainty. She married, bore 14 children, suffered what we'd now recognize as postpartum breakdowns, and lived in a world that had no space, no vocabulary for women's emotional pain. At one point, she was so overcome with grief and religious fear that she claimed visions, heard voices, and cried uncontrollably for hours at a time. To some, she was mad, to others, holy. What sets Marjorie apart isn't just her intensity, but the fact that she told her own story. In a world where women didn't write books, where poor women didn't get remembered, she dictated the book of Marjorie Kemp, considered the first autobiography in English. It's not easy reading, it's repetitive, winding, and often deeply strange, but it's hers. In her book, she writes of baking bread, washing floors, enduring mockery, traveling barefoot as a pilgrim, being jeered by crowds, denied by priests, rejected by her own family. She tells of visions of Christ, of personal spiritual awakenings, of being cast out from churches for crying too loud in prayer. She was detained more than once, accused of heresy, dragged before bishops, threatened with prison, and still she spoke. She named her pain. In doing so, she gave voice to a truth many medieval women, many servants, many invisible people carried in silence. That life was not just about survival, it was about being seen. Her book isn't polished. It's raw, rambling, and uneven. Just like life, and through it, we feel the weight of her days. The ache in her bones, the burn of being dismissed, but also the resilience, the will to make sense of the chaos, to narrate what others called madness, to insist that her story mattered, even when the world told her it didn't. Even now, Marjorie is controversial. Some historians admire her courage. Others dismiss her as unstable, dramatic. But maybe that's what makes her important. She didn't make herself palatable. She made herself real. And in a time when the poor, the women, the servants were supposed to vanish into the background, Marjorie left behind a map of her mind. A reminder that within every silent worker, every overlooked life, there's an interior world bursting with thought, hunger, memory, and prayer. She may not have worn livery, but she scrubbed her life clean with words. And in doing so, she made room for all the others who couldn't. Now, let's shift gently from a single voice to 1,000 unspoken ones. Stories told not in books, but in habits, gestures, and quiet resistance. When we think of rebellion, we often imagine shouting crowds, banners unfurled, maybe even fire in the streets. But most rebellion isn't loud, especially not when it comes from the bottom of a feudal staircase. In the world of the medieval servant, disobedience had to be quiet because the consequences weren't just discipline, they were exile, starvation, and death. And yet people found ways. Subtle, simple, beautifully human ways of saying, I am more than a pair of hands, I am here, and I will not vanish. It might begin with something as small as a loaf of bread. Let's say you're a kitchen maid. You prepare meals for a manor house. You see the pies cooling on the windowsill, the meat carved onto silver platters, the wine being poured for the guests. You serve. You bow. You retreat. But later, when the dining hall is empty, you slip a crust into your apron pocket. You eat it behind the stables. You lick the gravy off your fingers. It is not enough to fill you, but it is yours. Technically, that's theft. But really, it's reclamation. A taste of dignity. A reminder that you exist, even when no one's looking. Or maybe you're a scullery boy, tasked with washing pans so blackened they look like the night sky. The head cook insults you. The steward ignores you. So you do your job a little slower than usual. You leave a spot unwiped. You rinse the cups with cold water instead of hot. It's petty, small, but that moment of control, it belongs to you. When you have no voice, action becomes language. And every small refusal says, I'm still a person. Sometimes rebellion lived in stories. At night, When the fire burned low and the masters were asleep, servants would gather huddled in kitchens, under stairwells, behind barns. They told tales of lords made foolish, of queens with secret lovers, of rich men who tripped over their own pride. Laughter was shared, and though the stories changed with every telling, their purpose remained the same: to remind each other that those above them were not gods. Just people, just flawed, breakable, foolish people in better clothes. In those stories, the servant wins, the underdog triumphs, even if only for a few minutes. And then there were the rituals of resistance, not the loud kind, but deeply meaningful. A servant might deliberately wear a ribbon of color not allowed in the household, a quiet signal of love, mourning, or personal pride. They might hide charms or herbs under their beds, folk protection passed down from mothers and grandmothers. A belief in magic when the church and the Lord offered none. They might write letters they never sent, or carve their names into the underside of a wooden bench, proof that they were once there, hands calloused, heart beating. And sometimes rebellion was just surviving another day, enduring the silence, doing the work, keeping your dignity tucked beneath layers of rough spun wool, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you break. Because even when you didn't own your time, your body, your fate, you did own your mind. And in that quiet, guarded place, no master could reach you. As we step out of the kitchen smoke and back into the cold stone halls, we find ourselves at a crossroads where the lives of servants end and the lives of their masters begin. If the life of a servant was about shadows and silence, then the life of a noble was about spectacle. Where the kitchen was dark and smoky, the great hall gleamed with light from chandeliers and polished floors. Where servants moved quietly, careful not to be noticed, nobles moved with ceremony, with entitlement, with presence. But as we shift from the stone cellars to the solar upstairs, remember this: privilege does not mean peace, and status does not shield you from pressure. The noble class lived above the servants, yes, but they lived in glass boxes of expectations, of reputation, of rigid rules that dictated everything from who they could love to how they must eat. Let us walk with them now, gently, observantly, and see how the other side of the castle lived and what it cost them to stay there. If you were a noble in medieval Europe, your day began with being watched. Servants came into your chamber to dress you. Even this was a performance: lacing, tying, brushing, layering. Every item of clothing is signaled to your family, to your peers, to your rivals. Linen chemise, woolen hose, embroidered surcoat, fur-lined cloak, jewelry for those who could afford it, rosary beads, signet rings, a dagger if you were a man, a girdle belt if you were a woman. Your appearance had to speak for you before you said a word. You didn't just exist in noble society. You had to be seen, and being seen was exhausting. A single out-of-place hem could spark gossip. An ill-fitting shoe, an untied lace, proof of carelessness, or worse, decline. And so, you prepared. Every morning, every day. As if going into battle not with swords, but with glances, whispers, and expectations. Food was not just nourishment. It was hierarchy made edible. In the great hall, the head of the house sat at the high table, elevated above the rest. The lower tables sat further from the fire, with simpler food, fewer spices. Servants didn't eat here. They carried trays, cleared crumbs, poured wine. The noble's meal was an event, multiple courses, served with ceremony. Trenchers of bread, roasted meats, stews spiced with cinnamon and cloves. A servant announced each dish, another carved. Another brought water for washing hands between courses. It was not just about enjoying the food. It was about demonstrating control, displaying wealth, performing grace under scrutiny. Even your appetite was managed. To eat too greedily was vulgar. To eat too little, suspicious. Balance was everything. And for women, even more so, elegance was demanded. Clean fingers, quiet chewing, small bites. Your body did not belong entirely to you. It was a symbol of your family's worth. While a servant child learned to sweep, scrub, and carry, noble children were trained to lead, to charm, to represent. Boys learned Latin, estate law, the histories of their lineage. They were trained in writing, swordplay, diplomacy. Girls were taught embroidery, languages, manners, and the art of silence. From the time you could walk, you were being shaped into someone else's legacy. And though there was comfort, clothing, and food, there was no true freedom. A noble girl might be betrothed at age 8, married by 14, sent to live in another house, serve another man's name. Her value weighed in dowries and bloodlines. A boy might be sent away to foster with another noble family, expected to absorb discipline and loyalty. He would learn to make war before he could truly understand peace. Their futures were mapped. Their rebellions punished quietly a withdrawal of favor, an early marriage, a title revoked. Even play had purpose. Games were political. You smiled when told. You danced when required. You memorized the right words because nobility didn't just mean wealth. It meant performance, and performance never ended. If you were a servant, you feared starvation, exposure, the lash. If you were a noble, you feared something else, disgrace. Titles were fragile. One political misstep, one failed alliance, one rumor, and everything could vanish. Land could be seized, favor withdrawn, marriage prospects ruined. You could go from lord to exile in a heartbeat. The higher you stood, the farther you had to fall. Many nobles lived with this quiet terror. They trusted no one fully. They hedged alliances, sent sons to monasteries, built churches to offset sins they hadn't yet confessed. And beneath the feasts, the falconry, the music, there was anxiety. Because the world changed fast. A new king, a war, a famine, a whisper. So you maintained the mask. You paid your scribes. You performed your piety. You married strategically. And you never, ever let your guard down. Servants and nobles lived in the same world, but it wasn't the same life. They touched the same walls, breathed the same air, heard the same bells. But they moved through it in entirely different ways. One worked to survive, the other worked to be seen. One carried water, the other carried a name. Both were bound, just by different chains. And now, as the candle burns low, let us leave the castle behind. Let us step out into the night. Let us remember both those who served and those who ruled not as caricatures, but as people. Hungry, tired, hopeful, and flawed. And perhaps tonight, as you lie still, you carry them with you, just for a little while, until morning comes, until we tell another story. Good night and sleep well.